Hey guys, it's Peppa Gaming here, and today I'm making a video specifically about commander pairings for open field fighting, specifically for KVK2. So I made a list of the best pairings so far on this list, and I'm going to explain to you how to interpret my list. So from pair 1 to extra 1, it's not ranked from the best to worst. Okay, so it really depends on what type of commanders you have and what type of equipment you have. So I'll go over each role by role, but please understand that each pair 1 is not better than pair 2, and pair 2 is not better than pair 3, and so on. Okay, so for pair 1, I paired these 4 commanders together because one of the most popular pairings is Richard and Aethelflaed and Saladin and Aethelflaed, secondary. So either one of these two commanders is primary and Aethelflaed is secondary is fine in this instance. The reason is because both Richard and Saladin inflicts a slow reduction on their target. Richard is a bit better than Saladin because Richard actually slows more than 1 unit while Saladin slows 1 unit. So it might be a better pairing with Aethelflaed than Saladin, but this is obviously contingent on if you have the right equipment, right? I'll give you guys an example. If you only have epic equipment for infantry, but you have a full legendary set for cavalry, then obviously you don't want to go with Richard and Aethelflaed, and instead you want to go with Saladin and Aethelflaed, right? So it really depends on what type of equipment you have, but if you have the best infantry set, then I would prefer pairing Aethelflaed with Richard, open field. Please keep in mind this is also a ranking only for open field battles. I'll make another video for rallies and garrisoning if you guys are interested. Let me know below in the comments. Secondly, I have Khan here. Okay, so Khan is a really weird commander because 2 of his skills are inactive between 69% of the health to 51% of the health, because one of his skills is only active if the march has more than 70% of the troops that are alive, and one of his skills is only active if he has less than 50% troops alive. So basically between 70% and 50%, Khan only has 2 skills active, which is incrementally worse than both Minamoto and Cao Cao. So if you have Saladin and Khan max and you want to run 2 cav marches, you can do Saladin and Khan and Minamoto and Cao Cao, or Minamoto and Baibars. But if you only have 1 cav equipment, then obviously you want to do Saladin and Minamoto. That's the best cavalry setup. And I see some people do Saladin and YSG because of the skill damage, or sometimes even Saladin and Mehmed. But I personally think the best combo for Saladin is either Saladin and Aethelflaed if you're doing AoE damage, or Saladin and Minamoto if you want to do specifically single unit damage. That's the 2 best pairings. And then the 3rd best pairing is obviously Saladin and YSG if you want to do loss of skill damage. That would work too. Mehmed, it really comes in an awkward situation if you don't have Minamoto or YSG or Aethelflaed, but I find that very unlikely. Okay, so that solves the first role. So in conclusion, Khan is only here if you have no YSG, Minamoto, or Cao Cao. Okay, then you think about Khan. And to be honest, I would even pair Baibars with Saladin before Khan. Okay, so moving on to the second role, Edward and Tommy is probably the best pair. I mean, I've seen some people pair Edward with YSG, but I don't really recommend it, or YSG, Edward and Mehmed. I don't really recommend it because Edward's rage cycle is just way too long. As you guys know, I think it's either 1250 rage or 1300 rage. You guys can check on his active skills, which means Edward will use his active skills a lot less frequently than all the other archers. And if you put him as secondary, his 2500 damage factor decreases half, which is 1250 damage factor, which makes him very mediocre. So I think the only open field combination with Edward right now that's good is probably just Edward and Tommy. And this is a pretty good open field combo if you want to put debuff on your opponent. If you guys read Tommy's third or fourth skill, I believe it might be the fourth. It's the fourth skill. I'm sure. Basically, every stack of poison that Tommy gives to the opponent, whoever she targets, it will increase their skill damage. So, what that means is that Tommy will inflict more stacks because it's Edward and his skill cycle is a lot longer than other commanders. And number two, it's going to do more damage if you have other allies around you, people in your kingdom that's fighting with you, that's also doing the damage to the same target. Then everyone would do more damage because of Tommy's debuff. So overall, I would consider this a high damage dealt, high debuff team, but one of the weaknesses of this March is that it will be targeted immediately once someone sees it open field. So I would be very careful. If you are swarmed by more than like 3 troops, I would back off and wait for them to refocus someone else and then go back. Okay, so the third pairing is also another archer pairing. This one is a bit more flexible. So if you have Thutmose and YSG is great, but the highest damage dealt in this combo is actually YSG as primary and Mehmed as secondary. This is the highest damage dealt combination. Okay, and Thutmose and YSG actually, you would think that it would do more damage because it's a specifically archer focused commander pairing, but we tested it and we found out that YSG and Mehmed does way more damage. Okay, but one of the similar to Edward and Tommy, one of the downhill of this combination, it doesn't matter if you put Thutmose and YSG or YSG and Mehmed, it will get focused immediately on the field, so you have to be a bit more careful when you're fighting open field. I put Elfsid here in case someone has a weird situation where they might not have YSG or Mehmed, even though I find that very unlikely, and they might have Thutmose and Elfsid, both expertise, then I guess you can run that as well. I would put Thutmose as the primary because he has the support tree, and the support tree specializes in giving the commander more rage and basically reducing your skill cycle time. I would also do Thutmose and I forgot his name. I think is I am something. This bald dude. Okay, this is also a pretty good combination. He always needs to be a secondary commander because if you read his active skill decreases your opponent's rage only if he's a secondary commander. Okay, so he's also like a debuffer. So moving on to pair number 4. This is a combo you can run only if you want to run 2 cav marches and you have both all Saladin, Khan, or Saladin and Aethelflaed, and then Minamoto and Salsa all expertise. Then you can run both, and you need to have the right equipment as well and armaments, obviously. So, yeah. So the third march would be Minamoto primary and Salsa secondary, or even Minamoto primary and Baibar secondary. Purple epic commanders are still relevant in KVK2 because the museum buff hasn't come out yet. If you don't know what the museum buff is, you can Google it. It's basically a buff that comes out in Season of Conquest that buffs all the old legendary commanders, giving them more buffs and basically making epic commanders utterly useless. Okay, so on this roll, it's pretty simple. Minamoto's primary, and then you can do 1, 2, or maybe YSG, but I don't see a scenario where you would pair Minamoto with YSG because you would have an archer team anyways, unless you have no archer equipment at all. Then Minamoto and YSG would also be feasible if your Saladin is like 5111 or something that's really low and unusable. One role under it is an infantry march that I feel is very good. Martel and Alexander the Great. Martel as the primary is great because it has a defense tree, and actually Alex is kind of squishy compared to Richard and Martel. So by giving the defense tree, Alex actually lasts longer on the field. And Martel and Sun Tzu is also good if you don't have Alex at 5-5-1-1. If you have Alex at 5-5-1-1, I probably recommend him over Sun Tzu. Or Alex and Sun Tzu is also a great combination. Um, but Martel is also very strong. Martel and YSG is a very popular pairing in KVK1, but like I said, as long as you have a set of revival set, which is the epic archer commander equipment, I think you'll probably want to run YSG as an archer commander instead of pairing it with Martel, or I see also people pairing it with Alex in rallies, but this is an open field guide, so I won't go too deep in depth about that one. Extra number 1 troop, pairing below it is a buffer troop, and basically this troop is mainly to buff your other troops and your allies. You probably see this combination very frequently in Lost and Sunset Canyon, which is Constantine and Joan of Arc. This is a great combo because Joan of Arc is quite squishy on her own, and Constantine, as you know, has a skill where he heals massively when he's below 50% health. And Constantine and Mulan is also a great pairing. I'd probably say Constantine and Mulan is one pair that's to consider. And if you have Richard and you want to run Saladin and Aethelflaed, Richard and Joan of Arc is another great buff pairing. I explained in my previous video how Mulan and Joan of Arc sometimes overrides each other's buffs. Joan of Arc overriding Mulan's buff to be specific. But it's still good to have 2 teams of buffers because number 1, they will use their active skills at different times, which will ensure different buffs are active almost all the time. And number 2, even though one buff is overridden, for example, maybe Joan of Arc's defense buff would overwrite Mulan's 25% because Joan of Arc buffs it by 30%, but the attack and march speed buff is still there. So it only overrides one of the buffs because Joan of Arc only buffs one buff for each troop type, right? Attack, defense, and health. And then this extra 2, 3, 4 are just very niche pairings for people who might be free to play or super low spender where they don't have any of the commanders listed above expertise. Obviously Belosaurus and Baibars is a good example, good combo. It runs really fast, and if you really don't have Minamoto or Saladin or Cao Cao, which is quite weird actually. I would wonder where you spend all your gold heads at if none of them is expertise. Obviously Minamoto, you need the special bundle to get an expertise, but if you don't have all of them, you can try Belosaurus and Baibars. And if you don't have any of the archer commanders, you can try Kusunoki and Imhotep. I think that's his name. Might have butchered the pronunciation. Yeah. And then extra 4 is just like really useless commanders that if you have them expertise for some odd reason, you can use them. Obviously, Lu Bu and Diao Chan, you pair them together because of the extra buff they give to each other. And I see sometimes Caesar pairing with like YSG or Saladin, but I wouldn't recommend it. Everything above is way better than pairing with these commanders below. Probably just ignore the commanders below here and try to not use them as much as possible. I hope this guide helps everyone out. If you think it's helpful, please give it a thumbs up and like and subscribe. Thank you.